Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not going incognito by reversing my name into Dr. Aluflo, I'm here at Castle Wolfula reviewing movies. June-Iversal Horror Month continues with a review of Son of Dracula, starring Lon Chaney Jr. in the title role and released in 1943.
They have what I want, what I must have.
By the early 40s, the original founders of Universal, the Laemmle family, had long been forced out of the company, replaced by money-grubbing executives. So consequently, a lot of Universal's horror output during the war years were just sequels to their classic monster movies of the 30s. Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, and you guessed it, Dracula. The thing is, besides Son of Frankenstein, which I'll be reviewing in another video, all of these later Universal monster sequels tended to be of significantly lower quality compared to the first phase of monster films.
He has all the secrets of his father who created you.
This new Universal was just looking to make a quick buck off of their lucrative back catalog by pumping out sequels as fast as possible. And one such sequel was Son of Dracula, the third entry in the Dracula series. Dracula was the character that kicked off Universal's wave of talky monster flicks.
And now, I'll leave you.
But ironically, the Count always seemed to be particularly more cursed than his contemporary monsters. Several attempts at Dracula sequels throughout the 30s had fallen through, and the sequel that actually made it to release during the 30s, Dracula's Daughter, is only notable today for featuring a lesbian vampire. And you might be wondering, no, Son of Dracula is not about a gay vampire. Actually, you know, maybe it is. Wearing a cape is kinda gay. Honestly, if you think about it, wearing a cape is kinda like having a billboard on your back that says, "I love sucking dick." By the way, happy Pride Month, everybody!
Now the position has changed. I am master.
Anyway, cast in the titular role of Son of Dracula was Lon Chaney Jr. because, well, Universal cast him as any monster they could after the Wolfman success. Up to this point, Chaney Jr. had also played the Mummy and Frankenstein's monster. Might as well also have him play Dracula at this point. Son of Dracula, like the previous Dracula sequel, had a rushed, troubled production. Initially, Kurt Schudmack, the writer of The Wolfman, was to write the third Dracula film. But Schudmack's older brother, Robert Schudmack, signed on as the director and basically kicked his younger brother off the project due to a sibling rivalry between them. Robert Schudmack didn't want any other Schudmacks taking the attention off him. Kurt got his chance with Wolfman. Son of Dracula would be Robert's time to shine. This Schudmack shithead move ended up pushing the movie back several months while Universal found new writers. The final script was apparently written in a few days at the last minute before production began. But despite its production difficulties, does Son of Dracula manage to stand tall as a classic of the Universal Monsters canon? No, not really. There's a reason nobody fucking talks about this movie today, and I'll explain why in my review of Son of Dracula. But first I have a message from my sponsor. Me! Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Here's the movie I'll be streaming next Sunday. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested in my bonus streams, and I thank you in advance.
Didn't put anybody off at the wrong station, did you? We're here to meet a friend of the Caldwells, Count Alucard.
Son of Dracula takes place in New Orleans. Dr. Brewster and Frank Stanley are called upon to greet the guest of an affluent local, plantation owner named Colonel Caldwell. I wonder which side of the Civil War he fought for.
That'll be all for now, Stephen.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, the Colonel's mysterious Hungarian visitor is one Count Alucard. Alucard. There's something familiar about that name. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Here to meet a friend of the Caldwells, Count Alucard.
There was no count on this train.
The Count is nowhere to be found, though. Only his luggage, and the guy doesn't travel light.
Well, if there's no Alucard, there's no need of our waiting around here. I've got to get back to the office.
In secret, Alucard has been dating Colonel Caldwell's daughter, Kay, the local goth chick interested in the typical goth shit like black magic and fortune-telling.
There are other means of communication.
Oh, please, Kay. No lectures on metaphysics tonight, huh?
And when Kay's resident gypsy fortune-teller, Queen Zimba, predicts disaster for Kay's relationship with the Count,
you must stop him before it is too late.
a rubber bat very slowly swoops in to kill the old broad. Somehow. I don't know how, but somehow.
Queen Zimba!
Because Kay is the only goth chick in town, she's in high demand, despite the obvious mental issues that come with dating a goth woman. But much to the dismay of Kay's childhood sweetheart Frank, Kay's quite adamant on marrying Count Alucard.
Since we were kids, there's never been anyone in my heart but you. You know that. But
Has it anything to do with Alucard?
I mean, is she really gonna date some fucking loser who's not a count? Get real. Can't get any more goth than dating a count.
oh, no. You mustn't even think that.
Unbeknownst to Kay, though, the Count pays her father, Colonel Caldwell, a visit through unconventional means, and the Colonel coincidentally ends up dead, with Kay inheriting her father's estate.
According to this, you get nothing but the plantation.
And her and the Count get married right away by paying the local judge a convenient, unannounced past-midnight visit.
We want to be married.
Married? Yes, of course.
You know, I'm starting to think that Count Alucard might not have the best of intentions. And I'm not the only one. Everybody else is suspicious of Alucard's motivations. But mostly they just think Kay is mentally ill and making poor choices, because of course she is. She's a goth chick who doesn't have a father.
I'm going to make one last attempt to persuade her to leave. If she won't, I want you to join me in swearing out an insanity complaint against her.
Frank is the most disturbed by Count Alucard's presence because it's deprived Frank of being with a baddie who dresses like a baddie. So the cuckold Frank pays the newlyweds a visit by reasonably requesting that Alucard please leave town and that Kay also divorce the Count right away.
I'm afraid I do not understand.
In the morning, you'll take the first train out.
So Alucard politely requests that Frank get the fuck off his property. And Frank handles this better than most creepy stalker ex-boyfriends would, but the only ass Frank ends up capping is his beloved Kay's juicy and round one. So Frank, ever the hero, runs away, chased by the one thing everyone fears, a rubber bat. Ah! But Frank is only spared an undead ass beating by the Count's aversion to all things religious. It's just really divisive, you know? A disheveled Frank confides in his friend Dr. Brewster that he maybe kinda sorta murdered Kay.
Harry, I've killed Kay. It's all mixed up, but I know I shot her twice.
But when Dr. Brewster pays Alucard a visit that night, the doc finds Kay to be perfectly alive, sitting in bed wearing a fur coat for some reason. Must be really cold in that house. They need to turn off the AC.
Count Alucard and I were married tonight.
Yes, so the Count told me.
Things become complicated when Frank turns himself into the cops the next day, forcing the sheriff to verify Frank's claims of murder, only to confirm said claims by finding Kay's corpse in a nearby mausoleum. I hope Frank gets the chair for this.
Kay! Kay, my darling!
Son of Dracula tries to play itself off as some kind of a mystery as it slowly reveals information surrounding Count Alucard, like Dr. Brewster coming to the realization that Alucard spelled backwards is Dracula? What? No way! I thought the Son of Dracula was going to turn out to be that sleepy judge.
A certain Count Alucard is visiting a friend of mine, name spelled backward as Dracula.
Yeah, this is the movie that invented the Alucard alias for Dracula that anime, Castlevania, and even a Batman cartoon got a lot of mileage out of.
And you are? Dr. Alucard.
It's always a shocking revelation. You're telling me this guy who wears a cape and turns into a bat was Dracula the whole time? Holy shit! I love that when Dracula goes incognito, he just reverses his name. Doesn't even bother disguising himself. Apparently it works pretty well, I guess.
Announce Count Alucard.
Announce me.
But yeah, there just isn't much of a mystery to Son of Dracula, though, at least from the perspective that matters, the audience. We're watching a movie called Son of Dracula. Unless somebody walked into the theater midway through the film, they know what's going to go down right away. Alucard's obviously a vampire. It's clear he has evil intentions surrounding Kay. But the other characters don't know that, so we have to wait for them to catch up with what we already know.
But there are reasons why we ought to find out more about the Count.
All the while, a Hungarian professor named Laszlo brushes us up on vampire lore.
Broadly speaking, a vampire is satisfying a ravenous appetite for the blood of the living.
Yeah, we know vampires suck blood. Everybody knows that. But what's fucked up is that Dr. Brewster is shown reading a copy of Dracula earlier in the movie, but he acts like he doesn't know anything about Dracula.
Neither can I give a lucid explanation of a vampire.
Brewster's supposed to be a doctor, but he's dumb as shit. He has to have everything explained to him like he's a 6-year-old.
They're supposed to be immortals, no doubt.
Practically, so long as they return to their graves before sunrise.
He's supposed to be the audience surrogate who we learn things alongside of, but unless the 1943 audience this movie was intended for was all stupid as fuck, I can't imagine anybody not feeling condescended to while watching this tedious series of events unfold.
A simple cross.
It would take too long to explain why they fear it, but they do.
I know Son of Dracula looks like a black and white Murder, She Wrote episode, but it isn't so much a mystery as it is just waiting for things to happen once every possible piece of Dracula information has been exhausted by the 1 hour mark. If you're going to see a movie about Dracula, even his fail son, you're expecting to see quite a bit of Dracula in it. But Son of Dracula appears so infrequently in Son of Dracula, I forget he exists. And when there's a scene with Son of Dracula in it, I say, there's a Son of Dracula in this movie? Alucard barely appears in this film, and he even disappears for most of the final act. He's more of a plot device for the film than an actual character or even villain. We don't learn much about this new incarnation of Dracula or his relationship with his father beyond the fact that Alucard moved to New Orleans because he has devastated his home in the Carpathian Mountains, consequently turning it into a wasteland.
What was once a happy, productive region is today barren waste.
I guess that explains why New Orleans looks the way it does today. It's the Son of Dracula's doing.
Is sad testimony to its truth.
You know, this movie takes place in New Orleans, but nobody has a Louisiana accent in this, and speaking of accents, Lon Chaney Jr. didn't really bother putting much effort into his performance as the Count. Even though he's recently expatriated from Eastern Europe, Lon Chaney Jr. just did his regular voice.
Ours will be a different life, without material needs.
Which I guess could be argued as true to the original Dracula book, along with the mustache. Dracula trained himself to speak with the accent of whatever country he moves to in the book, but I don't know, there's just nothing really compelling about this take on Dracula. Chaney Jr. just doesn't have much of a screen presence as the Count, so the movie has to leverage his costume and cheesy effects to sell him as Dracula. Universal tried to turn Lon Chaney Jr. into a carbon copy of his father, the Man of 1,000 Faces, but Chaney Jr. just wasn't as versatile as his dad. The appeal of Chaney Jr.'s portrayal of the Wolfman was that he was an everyman, while also very unlikely the son of a lord who's about the same age as him. Chaney Jr. brought a layer of human vulnerability to the Wolfman. Playing an incarnation of pure evil like Dracula, though, he was just out of his depth. He didn't have a chance of pulling it off. Put him in Wolfman makeup, a normal guy like Lon Chaney Jr. becomes a monster. Put him in a cape, he just looks like a normal guy in a cape.
You are very brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for your own good.
It also doesn't help that Alucard is written to be an enigma, so the film doesn't even give Chaney Jr. a chance to be charismatic as his take on Dracula like with Lugosi. Alucard is an incredibly limiting role. Son of Dracula, the film, barely has any of the eerie, gothic atmosphere of previous Dracula films. It's mostly shot in normal houses. The film had an exceptionally low budget for the time, so they didn't exactly have the money to build lavish, huge gothic sets.
And with all this, I thought I was in the wrong place.
The movie is a wasted opportunity. I didn't even mention that Evelyn Ankers from The Wolfman is in this flick too, playing Kay's sister, but her role in the movie is entirely pointless, in the peripheral with little bearing on the plot. Being Kay's sister, their relationship should be the heart of the film, but instead it focuses almost entirely on Kay's and Frank's relationship, which is not as endearing.
See you later.
Son of Dracula, notably for a Universal monster movie at the time, features black cast members, but their, roles are all as servants in a, plantation setting. So, there's that.
I can't understand how you've been able to get along without servants.
Two of the actors who play these characters, Etta McDaniel and Sam McDaniel, though, were actually the sister and brother of Hattie McDaniel, the first African-American to win an Academy Award for Gone with the Wind. She, had to sit at a segregated table when she received her Oscar.
There's nobody in there now, sir.
Also, Sam McDaniel was the only African-American to ever appear in an episode of I Love Lucy. They made 180 episodes of that show, and they only had one black character who just carries Lucy's luggage. Really fucking depressing, right?
But Colonel Caldwell died tonight, and the family isn't receiving.
Announce me.
Back to Son of Dracula, though, it does have a slight twist to it. Kay was the true mastermind behind the film's events, not Alucard.
Through him, I attained immortality. Through me, you will do the same.
Kay was just using the Count so he could turn her into a vampire, and then Kay would betray Alucard, becoming the immortal ruler of, New Orleans. And she intended to do this with Frank by her side.
Isn't eternity together better than a few years of ordinary life?
But Frank has to take the big man out himself before he can become a vampire.
Either drive a stake through his heart, or burn his grave before he reaches it.
Could you imagine Frank as a vampire? You want to cuck my blood!
Stay away from me! Stay away from me!
While Frank is carrying out Kay's dark deeds, Doc, the professor, and the sheriff are always 2 steps behind. These characters get the most screen time, but they're entirely pointless to the movie. All they do is just explain things that we already know.
It's all becoming as plain as day, Professor.
It has been to me for some time.
If you cut them out, this movie would be 15 minutes long, and you'd still know what was going on.
We'll try to explain it to you on the way.
Frank's plan to kill Dracula is carried out in the last 5 minutes of the movie, and it's pretty easy and anticlimactic. Frank just burns Dracula's coffin moments before sunrise, and the Count just turns into a skeleton. Why would Dracula wait until just minutes before sunrise to return to his coffin? Overconfidence is what really fucking killed him.
To maintain his existence among the undead, Dracula had to be back in his coffin before sunrise.
The ending of Son of Dracula is the only thing I really like about the movie. Frank returns to his beloved Kay, but decides not to go through with her evil plan, instead putting his ring on her finger and burning her coffin, solemnly and wordlessly watching the flames consume the girl he loved since childhood. This had to have been the one thing Kurt Schudmack wrote that made it into the movie. Son of Dracula isn't a bad movie, it's just extremely mediocre, which can often be worse than being bad, just being completely unnotable. The film's only legacy is the Alucard alias, and the movie doesn't even seem to have a connection to the previous 2 Dracula films. In Son of Dracula, the previous Count was mentioned to have died in the 1800s.
According to the legends of my people, the last Count Dracula became one of the undead and was finally destroyed in the 19th century.
But Dracula 1931 and Dracula's Daughter seem to take place in the 30s when they were released. Son of Dracula is about as eventful as Dracula's Daughter, but the latter at least has some gothic atmosphere and lesbians holding it together. So if you're in the mood to spend time with just one of Dracula's kids, I guess you're better off spending time with the daughter than the son. He's not a bad guy, he's just a bit of a fuck-up. I give Son of Dracula an Alucard out of Dracula.
I am here because this is a young and virile race, not dry and decadent like ours.
Click the subscribe and bell button for June-Iversal Horror Month videos. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of the support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you like this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like previews, VIP Discord server access, private movie night streams, and credits in videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula t-shirts and other merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. See you all next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.